Hello, this is Galip Talay, Research Director at Al-Sharq Forum. Today we are in London for Europe and its Neighbourhood conference, which we co-organized with International Crisis Group and Chatham, which is very relevant and timely. Within the framework of this conference, I have with me Jean-Marie Guéhenno, which is the CEO and the President of International Crisis Group. We will be talking about what will the implication of the Brexit on the European foreign policy towards the MENA region. Jean-Marie, it's a pleasure having you.
Good.
Recently, we have had this Brexit. I'm sure it has many implications on the European scene, but looking from the region, one of the particularly thing that concerns us is, can Europe have a coherent policy towards the MENA in the absence of Britain?
Well, I think Europe has to have a coherent policy because the Middle East, North Africa region, it's really the neighborhood of Europe, and if that neighborhood is not in good shape, Europe is not in good shape. Now, can the Europeans without Britain be effective? I think a lot will depend on how Germany, France go through their elections next year. So I doubt that there can be any decisive policies before the end of 2017. But come the end of 2017, if those elections have results that consolidate a European perspective, I think there should be a real priority on some fundamental issues. I would think that Israel, Palestine, it's always forgotten, but I do believe that in terms of the credibility of the international community, ignoring a conflict that has now been there for decades and decades is wrong, and I think the Europeans should take a principled stance on that.
Well, I mean, Middle East and North Africa is just Europe's neighborhood. We only have a liquid border between us, which is the Mediterranean, and therefore, for a long time, actually, Europe was one step further from one step ahead from the U.S. when it comes to the issue of Israel and Palestine. Europe way before U.S. denoted the issue as a political issue, not a refugee crisis, and was way before the U.S. that said this issue will be settled with a two-state solution. Now we know that there is some kind of French initiative. Are you hopeful that this initiative can deliver anything?
I think at this stage it's unlikely with the new U.S. administration coming. In the present circumstances, I think it's unlikely. I think where some results could be achieved is in Libya. And for Libya, Europe has to change a bit its position. It has to make sure that all Libyans are included in the solution. I think the Europeans are right to support the legitimate authorities in Tripoli, but at the same time one needs to broaden the base of the Tripoli authorities, and that requires some engagement with the people in the east, and there the Europeans can help.
Well, I mean, from Barcelona process up until the EU Mediterranean process, Europe used to have quite large framework towards the region. And now you mentioned Libya as one of the areas that Europe could act upon and use it as in a sense, stepping stone. What other issue or the theme that you think that Europe can utilize and get the European countries agree upon and start, in a sense, some kind of policy towards the region?
Well, I think it's about legitimacy and principles. I think the whole region is going through a major crisis of legitimacy because governments often have not delivered for their people, and so the whole order that was established is under question, and we see it in the generation gap. We saw it in the Arab Spring, but there was no answer that really met the demands of the people. And I think for the Europeans, while of course I understand the need to deal with states and sometimes with authoritarian states, I think at the basis of any European position there has to be a sense that governments are there to serve their people, and when they are oppressive, when there is corruption, I think the Europeans should not be shy, should speak more clearly than they often do, because otherwise it reinforces the sense of double standards. It reinforces the sense that the foreigners care about their own security, but do not care really about the welfare of the people they're talking about.
Last question, do you see this happening anytime soon? Because right now the trend is the other way around. Previously the EU was, in a sense, like democracy, good governance, promoting entity in the region. And now what we see is basically EU not very much using the language of democracy promotion, good governance, or inclusiveness. And we do see, like, the French military engagement with Egypt, the stance on Gulf or on Saudi Arabia. Do you see once again Europe going back to its previous policy of supporting legitimate demands of the people, democracy promotion, good governance?
Well, I think the countering violent extremism agenda has been very destructive.
Yeah.
I think, of course, we are all against terrorists, but terrorists, they develop in a certain context. And if one ignores that context, then you will have more terrorists. And an an approach that is excessively focused on military response, security responses, and ignores the political context and the need to create the right political conditions to prevent terrorism, I think that is a short-sighted approach. And my hope is that the Europeans are gradually going to become aware of that, and they will return to a more long-term policy. One, of course, taking care of the security concerns, but a more long-term and therefore more principled policy. I think that's what's best for the security of Europe, and frankly the best for the region.
Jean-Marie Guéhenno, thank you very much.
Thank you.